What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast.
Where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Welcome. How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. You know, we're going to be touching on the New York Football Giants. I got my New York Giants jacket on with the back there.
Yeah,
Super Bowl.
sick.
Yeah, it's that early 90s, Phil Simms, Lawrence Taylor era Giants, man. I those teams are so cool to me. I got a soft spot for New York teams. I lived in New York for years. I'm not a Giants fan by any means, but you know how it is. You live in a city for 5 years. You watch them, you pick up on them, and you get to know a lot of fans from the team. So I'm pulling for the Giants. We got a lot to talk about, man. And right now, Hard Knocks is going on with the Giants front office, so it's kind of right on time for us. It's pretty fun.
It's a good insight. To any front office. I think this is going to be a smash hit, actually. I've enjoyed watching the first 2 episodes of this particular season of Hard Knocks more than I have the last probably 3 seasons of Hard Knocks. With the Lions exempt, that's my own team, so of course I loved that, but I didn't even watch Jets. I think Hard Knocks is kind of a washed product as of late, and this has been really fun to watch because this side of this side of it is fun, right? It's like this is the stuff that really gets me personally going. So watching these moves or lack thereof in this case is super fun.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, the most interesting thing the players do is play. So when you're constantly interviewing players and listening to players talk, it's just not that interesting, frankly. But we don't see the front office play because the front office doesn't play. So it's like it's a peek behind, some of the mind behind the madness, and I'm loving every second of it so far. So I'm with you. But let's dive in, man. Let's roll the clip. Giants, baby. All right, we're back. We're doing the Giants. Look, I texted you a couple days ago when we were preparing for this episode, and I asked you if I could do something a little different to start the show off versus the typical 2023 recap that we start every show off with, right? We recap last season and kind of make our way into the segments of this year. And, in light of the Hard Knocks episode, we're talking about the Giants again as a football community, a little more than we've been talking about them in recent years. And I asked you if I could do a bigger picture recap of this organization, and you agreed to it. And so for you and for this audience, I'm going to hop in the DeLorean and go back in time.
Welcome to my latest experiment. This is a big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life.
Well, it's a DeLorean, right?
Bear with me, Marty. All your questions will be answered. Roll tape.
Okay,
and we'll proceed.
To the skinny jean era of 2016 and work my way up from there. You know what I'm saying?
A great year. A great year.
2016 was an awesome year. Great music, great
Summer
fun
16
stuff.
Special.
Yeah, and a good year for the Giants. I mean, starting back in 2016, this is where things get interesting for me in terms of where we are now as an organization, as a Giants franchise, where we are now, because this was once a blue blood. It no longer is. And how did we get here, right? When we were in middle school and high school, they beat the Patriots twice. the Giants were in that class where Philly, the Steelers, New England at the time, the Chiefs, they're not there anymore. And I think 2016 is important to me because I was asking myself, when was the last time that I gave a rip about this football team in any real capacity? And it was when Odell Beckham was on a boat with Trey Songz. That was the last time that I really talked about the Giants and cared about the Giants. And I was living in New York City at the time, so I was watching a lot of them. Odell was my favorite player. And that was a good football team. They went 11-5. The Boatgate happens, or Trey Songz Gate, whatever you want to call it. And Odell lays an egg in the playoff game. They get blown out at Lambeau Field. And despite that, it felt like because of Odell, because Eli was still playing well, because you had pieces, that year, Collins, the safety, was an all-pro. Landon Collins. Olivier Vernon was an all-pro. Odell was an all-pro. You felt like this team was returning to form after a few years of missing the playoffs post-Super Bowl, right? And you followed it up with a 3-13 season in 2017. And the O-line is horrible. And that's a constant theme from then until now. They've not been able to build an O-line. 2017, the O-line falls apart. Yes, there's injuries, but going 3-13 is so dramatic that the front office, the ownership actually fires Ben McAdoo. They fire Jerry Reese, and they completely reset for 2018. Problem is, you reset with a guy named Dave Gettleman at GM, who, for my money, up there with maybe like the likes of a guy like Scott Federer, is the worst GM in recent memory. I mean, if there's a candidate, in my opinion, for a modern day town square kind of Game of Thrones shame style, that man should have to walk through New York City with no clothes on while the city of New York throws tomatoes at this guy. He destroyed this organization from the inside out. He said in his presser, I'm going to come into the office every single day and kick ass.
My plan is to come in here every day and kick ass. That's my plan, okay? And I'm going to keep doing it until they either take my key card or the Lord calls me home.
And instead, he came into the office every day and got his ass kicked. And he started off great, honestly, like immediately with bad moves, hiring Pat Shurmur to be their head coach. Because of the 3-13 record, they have the number 2 pick in the draft. He takes a running back. A running back who I love, by the way, and we'll obviously touch on later. Saquon Barkley was a cornerstone of this franchise for the last few years. But it's a running back, number 2 overall, when you don't have a QB for the future. You still have Eli, but he's on his last legs. It's a running back at number 2, right? They go 5-11 Saquon's first year. Saquon, has a tremendous rookie season. I believe he wins Rookie of the Year offensively. And, the Eli Manning era comes to an end, right? That's sort of the bookmark chapter closing of the Eli era. 2019, your wonderful GM, Dave Gettleman, starts the offseason off by trading Olivier Vernon and Odell Beckham to the Cleveland Browns for not a lot, picks that we never really got. You know what I'm saying? Like, these guys, they traded like 2 cornerstone all-star pieces for really a couple of picks. They draft Daniel Jones at number 6 overall, and they finish 4-12. Pat Shurmur's fired, and Joe Judge is hired instead. So we're turning the page yet again with a new era in New York, which is the Joe Judge era, and also the Jason Garrett era at OC. 2020, they come out, team goes 6-10. Daniel Jones struggles. Barkley tears his ACL. It's another lost season, essentially. 2021, they come back out yet again and go 4-13 this time. So they regress. Gettleman retires. Yes, Gettleman actually, New York fans, you didn't even get the satisfaction of seeing Gettleman get fired. He actually got to retire on his own accord. But, he retires after the 4-13 2021 year, and Joe Judge is fired. 2022 comes around. You hire Brian Daboll from Buffalo, and you hire Joe Schoen at GM from Buffalo. This is the year that everybody holds up in high esteem as kind of the the saving grace season, right? The buy more time season that got Daniel Jones paid, that got Dayball another year, that got Shane another year, right? It's this whole kind of redemption season. But what's interesting to me about that particular year, 2022, is the team went 9-7-1 that year and finished third in the division. They actually squeaked into the playoffs in a very weird NFC, and they beat a Minnesota Vikings team that had won 13 games but had won almost all of their games by a single possession and was actually not very good. And so, you move on to the next round, the divisional round, you get absolutely dog-walked by Philadelphia, and that's that. But because you played well enough, because Dayball showed some flashes, and because things had been so bad for so many years, there were lofty expectations, which brings us to our 2023 recap. You follow that season up by a 40-0 loss at home opening weekend to Dallas? That's how you start the season in 2023? 40-0 to Dallas at home in front of your fans, season ticket holders, Giant fans. That's what you put on the field. That's your offseason. That's your new development after 2022. It was a failed season. Offensive line was bottom 5. Daniel Jones tears his ACL. I mean, things to me got so bad last year that it got to the point where the only thing that we were talking about to celebrate the Giants was like weird, creepy, cringy Italian stereotypes with Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets.
He discovered America is what he did. He was a brave Italian explorer, and in this house, Christopher Columbus is a hero. End of story.
Bad Soprano memes with Tommy DeVito. I don't know how this organization can go into this season and look its fans in the eyes and tell them that they think they should renew their season tickets. I don't know how this organization still has the ability to sell this to its fan base, especially after you move off a guy like Saquon Barkley this offseason, which we'll touch on. I think every year we get further away from Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning and that pass rush era. We become more and more aware, as people who follow the Giants, that John Mara at ownership really actually is quite a farther apple away from the tree than his father, Wellington. And I'm going to cue you up to talk about their new GM, but before I do, I don't think you have the answer at GM either. I think you hired a soft, squishy man with no direction and no conviction who is not a leader and is not the guy. So I ask you, Andy, as a Giants fan, what can this team sell its fans at this point? Pass it over to you.
Well, it sucks that I have to follow that up. Holy shit, man. Wow. Can we stop the video right there? That's okay.
They've fallen
We'll just
off.
leave it at that.
They've completely fallen off. They've completely fallen off, and it never gets discussed.
It was beautifully said because you know what they remind me of? They remind me very much. It's very similar to what we've kind of seen the Los Angeles Lakers become. If you remove that 2020 kind of iffy bubble season where, yeah, I know they were the best team in the league before they stopped for COVID, but it's kind of this. It's this fake thing. It's this fake allure. It's this, but it's New York. It's Saquon Barkley. It's like, no, this is really, really bad, and we need to really address it. Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. I think you hired such a beta male to be your. No, it's true. I'm sorry that I know that that might trigger people and be like, oh, what does it matter if he's a beta? But it does matter.
He's the human embodiment of a warm glass of milk.
No, it's so accurate. It's just, and you watch Hard Knocks, and it just confirms everything that you kind of think already, which is just like, I don't know if this GM's any good. You look at his draft picks, and I'll get over those in a second, but before Hard Knocks comes out, you look at the draft picks and you go, I'm not sure this GM is very good. He might not be terrible, but he's not very good. And then this offseason happens, And then you see all of this happen on Hard Knocks, and you go, "Oh no, he's bad. He's not good, even kind of." And I'll start with his 2022 draft, because that was when he really like took over. This 24 draft was his third draft with the team. His first draft, he takes Kayvon Thibodeau, number 5 overall. Kayvon Thibodeau has not been a bad player. He's not been a bust. He's not been, I don't know, a Jamarcus Russell, if you will, or a Courtney Brown. He wasn't taken high and just looks like absolute dog water. But he has left a lot to be desired to this point. I think he benefits a lot from playing next to Dexter Lawrence, and he kind of finds his way into sacks here and there that maybe weren't necessarily earned or deserved. And I know that might be a hot take, but that's just kind of what I'm seeing on the film. And I'll get into a little bit of that later. At number 7, you have another top 10 pick. And you take Evan Neal, who's been an utter bust. He's a terrible left tackle. I mean, terrible. He's just not good. And when you have 2 high picks like that, it can really change your franchise. If you hit on both of those guys, it can change your entire landscape for the next 10 years. I mean, look at Houston. They hit on 2 guys. They hit on a quarterback and an edge, and they're considered one of the premier teams in football now. And it's been 1 year. You missed. I won't say you missed on both. You missed on one for sure. You can argue that you missed on another, because I'm not sure he was a top 10 talent. He can get there, but as it sits right now, he's number 3 on your D line, and you had to trade for a guy to kind of be your number 1 edge. So that's not a great sign. In the 3rd round, you take Wan'Dale Robinson. He's a guy. He's nothing special. And then in the 4th round, you take Joshua Izidu, who I'm not even sure is like plays. He's an offensive lineman. He ends the year with a 42.4 PFF grade, whatever that is. And that's on a bad line. Go to 2023. First round, you pick 24th, right? Kind of a fluky year. You end up in the playoffs, going to the 2nd round. So you don't have a high draft pick. And you take Deonte Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. Deonte Banks, I think, will be good. And again, I'll get to this later, but I think Deonte Banks will be good. I think if you just look at like a PFF grade, which he came in at 51.4, that's bad. That's objectively bad. But my problem is that you're playing with a secondary that has nothing else in it. So Deonte Banks was thrown out there to the Wolves and had to go up against, everybody else's wide receiver 1 and just kind of deal. I think we've seen flashes from him that show that he could maybe potentially get to that point, but it wasn't what you needed. It wasn't a Sauce Gardner. It wasn't a Jalen Ramsey. It wasn't, and I'm not saying that you're going to necessarily get those guys at 24, but it's still a 1st round pick, and it's not looking great. Round 2, you take John Michael Schmitz, a center out of Minnesota. He's been terrible.
John
he played
Jacob?
13 games left.
Jingleheimer?
John Michael. Yeah,
Oh,
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz. John Michael Schmitz. He has been awful. He's your starting center, which sucks for you guys. He played 13 games last year. He ended the year with a 41.4 PFF grade on a terrible, terrible O-line. It's not looking good. And then round 3, you took Jalen Hyatt, another guy. He's just kind of been a guy. So when you look at, kind of the first 6, 7 picks, your first 3 rounds, the rounds that really matter, I mean, how many of these guys are really guys? You're talking Kayvon Thibodeau and Deonte Banks, maybe. 2 of 6, 2 of 7. That's not great. I guess you can argue Wan'Dale Robinson, but he's not a difference maker. You can argue Jalen Hyatt, but they're not difference makers. If you miss, more importantly, you whiffed on 2 offensive linemen in high positions. You can't do that. And then you follow it up this year by taking a player at 6 who I really like in Malik Neighbors, but I don't think that's the piece that you guys needed right now. I mean, when you're looking at a generational offensive line draft, if you're picking 6, then you know that you have a bust at center and a bust at left tackle, and there's an abundance of these guys. Why would you not trade back with a team that wants to jump up? Why would you not, we heard about the Raiders really wanting to jump up and get Michael Penix. Why wouldn't you call the Raiders and trade back to 14 with them and acquire some war pieces for the future? Because you have a long way to go with this roster. You didn't retain Saquon Barkley for whatever reason. I mean, I know that you're going to get people who come on here and say, oh, we don't pay running backs. We don't pay running backs. When you're the New York Giants, go ahead and pay Saquon Barkley, because there's a real good chance that he might waltz over to Philadelphia and get paid, which is exactly what he did.
Right.
And they are going to make you pay twice this year. Twice. Well, Saquon is going to make you pay.
You're spot on. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
how is that exactly? I wanted to,
I don't know.
Because what you're saying about the draft picks is spot on. But to do you one better, and I don't have, we only get a couple of days to really prepare for this, so we have to kind of consolidate what we want to talk about. I don't have the spreadsheet of all the financials in front of me about the contract breakdowns.
Yeah.
But how is it exactly that Philadelphia, whose roster is, I would say 9 or 10x more talented than yours, had the money for Saquon Barkley, but you didn't? Yeah. It sort of reminds me of that Breaking Bad meme where it's like, where's the money, Skyler?
Where is it? Where's the rest? The money, Skyler. Where is the rest?
Like, where is the money? Yeah. Where is it going? You. Why can you never retain these pieces? And what's interesting to me too, and why I have such so much doubt about this GM is you're watching this show, right? And it's just being able to read people, and you're watching it and you go, oh, he's yucking it up for the cameras. He doesn't want to re-sign Saquon Barkley. He's making no effort to you can tell he's going, okay, how do I not have to pay this guy, but make it look like I'm not the guy planting the flag and making the tough choice
100%.
And getting the backlash. We tried. No, be a leader. You don't want him back. Say it.
No, I'm with you. 100%. He's sitting there to a boardroom trying to convince them that Devin Singletary is a lot cheaper and would give you a ton of production. Get out of here. Say it was we all knew what the running back market was this particular year. It was Saquon Barkley, giant gap, Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, Aaron Jones, those type of guys. Yeah, right. Derrick Henry, yeah, right. But even then, I'm still taking a 26-year-old Saquon over Derrick Henry any day.
It's a no-brainer.
Dude, a healthy Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the league, including Christian McCaffrey. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it. And granted, he hasn't been healthy, but I can promise you he's going to be healthy this year. I can just promise you that. He's going to play all 17, isn't he? And he's going to put up unbelievable numbers over there in Philly just because you guys didn't sign him. Hey, what happened with Xavier McKinney? Why did you let him go to a conference rival? You let him just waltz over to to Green Bay? Why? Why did you not bring him back? Have you seen your secondary? It's dog shit. It's terrible. Why would you let a Pro Bowl safety walk? Just pay him the money. Where's the money? Where did the money go where you couldn't pay this guy?
Well,
it doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't. I mean, and the thing is too is the unfortunate part of it is, you're watching this show and you kind of think to yourself, I think you have your coach. Like, he's full of piss and vinegar.
You do.
He knows what he's doing. He's rough around the edges. He's blue collar. He's a guy's guy. He's got that vibe to him. Anybody who's spent time in Queens, right? He's got kind of pre-modern gentrification Queens. He's got that vibe to him where he feels New York. But the lack of congruence with the GM, who is sort of this nothing of a man, who's not a leader, who's not has no direction, who's timid, who's quiet, who's sort of afraid to go on camera and go, you know what, screw the fans. I don't want Saquon back. I'm not paying him. I'm the leader here. I'm planting my flag. It's like I feel like this lack of congruence with the coaching and with the front office is something that is also an area of concern for me.
100%.
But yeah, man, I mean, I think you're spot on with your whole take on the GM and the draft picks. It kind of tees me up to talk about the offense, if you don't mind, so we can kind of
Go ahead.
Kind of go through
There's
this
not
roster.
much to talk
'Cause, you know,
about.
we're in 2024 now. I mean, we're we've kind of set up the preamble, so it's time to kind of start talking about some of these pieces. And to be honest, I think there's nowhere else to start other than quarterback. To me, when I look at the ultimate question mark of this team, I look at Daniel Jones or Danny Dimes, if you will, right? Depending on kind of what you believe that you should be calling him. I kind of don't really think he is Danny Dimes, but that's neither here nor there. I think for me, you know, I told you this when we were talking pre-show. This to me is the hardest quarterback in the NFL for me to evaluate because I don't believe that this quarterback is elite at all. I believe that taking him 6 overall out of Duke, I mean, those of us who were kind of like draft junkies who followed him, he wasn't a top 10 pick talent-wise. He never was. I mean, he was not a star at Duke. He was not this great player that, you know, other teams were sort of foaming at the mouth to draft a quarterback. I mean, he was a guy. I mean, he should have been picked where Jalen Hurts was picked, kind of like in that zone of like, yeah, we're taking a stab at this second-round quarterback, but you took him at 6. The expectations were too high from the beginning. The team fit was wrong from the beginning. This guy has, God bless him, he's played with arguably the worst weapons group in the NFL outside of Saquon Barkley, pass catchers, worst group, and a bottom 5 offensive line every year, basically, he's been in the league. So when I say it's impossible for me to evaluate him, I don't know what he can be because this team has done such a bad job at roster building, going back to Gettleman, going into Joe Schoen. You know, the year in 2022 where he stayed healthy all season and Saquon stayed healthy all season and Dayball, you know, worked a little bit of Dayball magic and kind of QB whispered as he does. That's his best season. That's the season that got him paid, right? He had only 15 touchdown passes in the air that year. It wasn't even anywhere near, it wasn't even in the top 20 of touchdown passes that season. And again, this season, when I think of Daniel Jones, I think of a very mediocre quarterback with one little wrinkle, and that is the mobility. He's good. He's a good runner. He's mobile. Problem is, this year he's coming off of an ACL. And the year that I just referred to, 2022, the year that got Daniel paid, the year with the winning record, the year that he stayed healthy and this team came together just a little bit, what made him special that year was 700 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns rushing. Behind this O-line off a torn ACL, and I'm not even sure he's going to be healthy week 1, that's up in the air. Is he going to be able to rush for 700 yards and score 7 touchdowns on the ground this year? I personally don't think so. And that's an area of concern for me. So when I say that I think the problem I have with Daniel Jones is people are so polarized on him. They really hate this guy so much. And I don't think he's the answer. But I think that this year will be the last year in New York. I think that this team is going to crash and burn with him at quarterback. And I hope he gets another chance with a good team to kind of have that Baker Mayfield arc. Because I think he is talented enough to be a decent starting quarterback, a bridge starting quarterback, a high-level backup. But this team, he can't overcome. He's just not good enough to overcome what this roster is. So that's my 2 cents on him. Going over the offensive line, it's pretty simple for me. You're effed. That's pretty much where I stand on it. I think you're completely screwed. I think Andrew Thomas is a hell of a football player, and I think outside of that, you are in the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the NFL. Your kind of big free agent addition, you know, the money that you should have given Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley was given to friend of the show, John Runyon, former Michigan guard from Green Bay. You paid him $30 million for 3 years, which is what the Eagles gave Saquon, ironically. He got benched in Green Bay last year. He's not an elite guard. He's a guy. He's probably an upgrade from what you've had, but is he the kind of guard that you look at like a Robert Hunt and go, see, we got a guy. No, he's just a guy. He's a rotational, low-end starter, high-end backup guard. So that's your big wrinkle at O-line. You touched on the Neighbors pick, and for me, it's really tricky because on one hand, I completely agree with you on trading back and grabbing an offensive lineman. On the other hand, I don't, because in my opinion, Malik Neighbors is special. I think he's a very, very, very good wide receiver. I would tell you that the reason why I don't think they should have traded back and grabbed an O-lineman is because they've not shown the ability to scout O-linemen well. But guess what, buddy? They haven't shown the ability to scout wide receiver well either. Because in 2022, you drafted, and you touched on it beautifully in the second round, Wan'Dale Robinson, who, last year had 60 catches for 500 yards and 1 touchdown. He's 5'8". He's a speed guy. He's not a 1. He's a small piece. And then last year, you drafted Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee in the third round, who had, wait for it, 23 catches on 373 yards and 0 touchdowns last year. 6 foot, 185 pounds, undersized speed receiver. He could be a bit of a deep threat, but he's a nothing. I don't think, especially after moving on from Saquon Barkley, which I think was a huge mistake, that in good conscience, in good faith, this front office could put Daniel Jones or any other quarterback out there throwing to these guys. So I do think they made a business decision to grab Neighbors. Who knows if it's the right pick? Who knows if it's the right fit? I think it's a bad fit for Neighbors himself from a career perspective. I think he's in trouble. But from a team perspective, it's not that I disagree with you. It's almost like pick your poison, right? If you draft an O-lineman, who knows if it's the right guy, even if he's good? Who are you throwing to? You didn't draft an O-lineman. You drafted a wide receiver that I like. So at least you have someone to throw to. I think he has the potential to be a real 1. Nobody else in this room does. But you're still behind that O-line. So in many ways, this team is between a rock and a Jets place, so to speak, where there is just no hope offensively. And I think ultimately that's why moving on from Saquon was, such a colossal fail, because at least when you have a dynamic superstar player, at least one, it gives you a sense of hope as a fan base and excitement. But Devin Singletary is not going to do anything next year on this team besides be mediocre. So that's it. That's my breakdown of the offense. A little bit of Daniel Jones' defense, but ultimately I don't think that you have the team to let Daniel Jones be mediocre and get away with it. So I think you're in for a long season. And the whole, before I give it back to you, the whole, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets, that whole thing, forget it. Forget about it, right? Like, no.
It's also like if something is the greatest thing in the world, like Mingero's peppers, forget about it, But it's also like saying go to hell, too. Like, hey, Paulie, you got a 1-inch pecker, and Paulie says, forget about it.
Forget about it. Paulie, forget about it.
Knock it off. He's not a star. I'm tired of that whole shtick. It's stupid and it's cringe. So stop. But yeah, man, that's it. That's my breakdown of the offense. I want to let you talk about the defense, and we'll let these good folks get out of here. But that's what I got. Sure
thing. Well, it's rough. It's rough on the offensive side. There's not a ton of gleaming hope. It's kind of all in the hands of Andrew Thomas and Malik Neighbors, and that's not a good place to be in. The good thing is that the Giants, I think, for better or for worse, are known for their defensive side of the ball. I think their history comes from the defensive side of the ball, and you got one guy who, he's a superstar, right? Dexter Lawrence. He's 6'4", 340 pounds. He, in my opinion, is the best interior lineman in the league. You want to take Chris Jones? That's fine. I don't care. But Chris Jones is 30 years old, and Dexter Lawrence is 26. Give me that guy. Give me the guy that will go out there and play every day for the New York Football Giants and keep a smile on his face while absolutely destroying the center in front of him, the center and the guard in front of him. He is. He's a gravitational force. He's a wrecking ball. You know, he's a guy who makes the best centers Sundays feel like hell, right? Like, he's really just that good. And Giants fans, you know, if you're still with us at this point, you know that there's not much to say about him. He's at worst the second best interior lineman. Again, I think he's the best. The problem I have, and it's not a Dexter Lawrence problem, it's a D-line problem, which is that you didn't retain Ashawn Robinson. You traded away Leonard Williams last year, and now you brought in a guy, Jordan Phillips, who sucks. He's a guy. He's a meat sack. He's a body to put out there next to Dexter Lawrence. So the message that you are sending your superstar on you have one superstar on this team, and it's Dexter Lawrence, and you're sending him a message and saying, you go in there and just do that yourself. You're really good. We paid you big money. Why don't you just go in there and just handle it? You don't need any help on the interior. It'll be okay. We'll get you some guys on the edge, but you don't need any help on the interior, which is ridiculous. If you go get him a running mate, he was begging you guys to go get Christian Wilkins because they played together in college. As far as texting your GM, as we saw in Hard Knocks, and saying, please go get him for me, and you didn't. And not only did you not go get Christian Wilkins, which I'm not going to beat you up about too much. Obviously, Joe Shane is a cheap bastard, and he's not good with money, so I don't think he was going to give Christian Wilkins that money, but you didn't even retain Ashawn Robinson. That's like bare ball. That's like asking you to retain like mid completely. Ashawn Robinson isn't anything special, but Jordan Phillips sucks. He can't play run D. He's a body. He's fine at pass rush, but he's terrible at run D. What are you doing? You're asking Lawrence to play alone. You went and traded for Brian Burns, which I think is actually a good thing for you guys. I don't think Brian Burns is an A tier edge, but I think he's probably as high as you can get at the B tier. And with playing next to Dexter Lawrence, he might be able to take a leap into that A tier. He played next to Derek Brown in Carolina, so we know he can be a positive force. He's a high motor guy, right? He's one of these guys that's never going to stop. He's got great bend. He's got great athleticism. He is a freak. Not great in I think it's pass rush. Yeah, he lacks a bit of, it's run defense. Run defense he's not very good at, but he's a workhorse. He tries his hardest. He's never going to give up on a play. I think that's going to work out for you. And when you take the combination of Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, and then combination, and then you add in Kayvon Thibodeau, who I kind of beat up on earlier, but I'll explain why in kind of a more long-winded rant. Kayvon Thibodeau objectively took a step back last year, and I know that you're going to sit there and say, absolutely not. He got 6 more sacks, not a chance. He had 4 sacks his rookie year. He had 10 sacks last year. He didn't get worse. The problem is you're right. He didn't necessarily get worse, but he got 6 of those sacks came against 1, the Commanders, and 2, the Jets. So two of the bottom 5 O lines in the league last year. So that doesn't impress me personally. But last year he had, 2022, his rookie year, he had 44 pressures on, he had 40 pressures on 409 snaps, right? But last year he had 44 pressures on 520 snaps. So he only got 4 more pressures in about 100 more snaps. Actually, more than 100 snaps. So it brings your pressures down, overall. And I don't like to see that. I don't like to see a tick back on a second year. I would expect a tick forward, right? Doesn't have to be anything world beating, but I do need to see you take a step forward. All that kind of being said, and all the eye rolls that I'm sure happened just now, I will end it by saying, with Dexter Lawrence there, Brian Burns there now, Thibodeau becomes your certified number 3. He is not better than either of those guys, and he's not really in the same class as either of those guys. He's your number 3 now. And because of that, I think it'll open up a little more, a few more gaps, a few more lanes for him to get to the quarterback, get these pressures up a little bit, and actually have quite a large breakout this season. So, I think your line,
but again,
in itself could.
I'm sorry to
go
interrupt
ahead.
you, but again, it's like this is the massive frustration I have, and it all goes back to the front office. I mean, your top 5 pick in a draft is a 3. Like,
He's a 3.
you had to
And
trade capital for
You had to
Brian
get
Burns.
100%.
You had to
give up
trade
assets.
away picks during a rebuild for a guy like Brian Burns because it's not happening. And I mean, again, we've touched on our guy Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. It's not even close. And that's where,
close.
I mean, he's not even, and again, Trayvon Walker's a guy who gets beat up on a ton for being the number 1 overall pick, but in that very same class, right? But just a couple of picks later, you take Kayvon Thibodeau, and Trayvon Walker is significantly better in run defense. Kayvon Thibodeau can't run defend. So
No, he can't. He's not very good at it at all.
to me, he is like a 3rd rounder almost. That's how he plays. And I don't mean to beat up on the kid because he does have talent. He's fast, explosive. But I just wanted to chime in with that because I mean that it all goes back to the front office. This is like
Sure.
This guy is not a star. He's not a stud player. He hasn't proven that yet, and it's tough for a top 5 pick, man. That's just not like what you want. Late first, maybe.
Late first. I mean, that's where he was. You moved to your linebackers. Your linebacking core is fine. They're whatever. They're maybe a little better than mid. You got Bobby Okikre, I think is how you say it.
I think it's Okurike, and he's good.
Okurike. Yeah. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, he's good. You brought him in from Indianapolis. Paid him a bunch of money last year. He's been a solid piece for you. He's been a solid B to B plus linebacker in this league. Nothing more about it. He's not elite in anything, but he's real solid in both. He's solid in coverage and he's solid in run D, and that's all you can ask for. Micah McFadden. He's your number 2. He's going into year 3. He showed some flashes last year. I think playing next to Bobby really helped him out. He's a number 2. He's good against the blitz. He's good with the blitz. Good against the run. He's not great in coverage, but he can learn. He can definitely learn. The interesting piece in your linebacking core, which I obviously don't want to spend too much time on, is Isaiah Simmons. Kind of another questionable Joe Schoen trade. What exactly was the plan here? I know that Isaiah Simmons is a freak athletically, and he's one of those guys that you can he's kind of like a dime back, right? Like he can play linebacker, he can play safety, he can play like a little inside corner if need be. Like he's one of those pieces that's really flexible. Great 3rd down piece, but you have no business having him on your team in particular. Like you brought him into a Wink Martindale system. You brought him into a Brian Dable coached Giants team. Like that's an offensive mind. He needs to go play with like Mike McDonald in Seattle or Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, or any of these defensive. Robert Saleh, he'd probably be amazing if he just switched New York teams. But I just don't think he really fits on your team. I don't think that it's a proper fit. And he was drafted 10th overall by Arizona a few years ago, and I know that it's seemingly the talent is there. It's just who can find the right spot for him. And I don't think you guys are that.
Well, and I also don't love that he's spending more time, his full-time job is being on the sideline, and he's taking weekend trips to the field. I don't like that. I'd like you to be on the field more. Just if you're going to have, and why isn't he? You don't have studs back there, so why exactly are you? I'm with you.
I'm gonna get into that.
Yeah, please do, because I think this
Um,
might be the worst unit on the team.
I think it's the worst unit in the NFL. Frankly, and it's not necessarily their fault. We just don't know what they are. You have Deonte Banks, who I touched on earlier. Flashes flashes of being really good. I think Deonte Banks is actually going to pan out. I'm not like a Deonte Banks hater, but he's not. You needed him to be Pat Surtain, and he's not. You know what I mean? You needed him to be Sauce Gardner like right away, and he just hasn't been. And he was thrown to the fire last year. It was like, hey, bro, you got to go guard AJ Brown. You got to go guard Terry McLaurin. You got to go guard CeeDee Lamb. Like, you have to just take these guys on, which is great experience. But the problem is that there's no veteran presence on this entire secondary. Deonte Banks is like the most veteran player, and he was just drafted in the first round last year. Like, there's nobody else here. You took Drew Phillips in the 3rd round out of Kentucky. I have no idea what he's going to be. It's a 3rd round cornerback who is going to have to be a starter for you. That's the reality of it. You have Cordell Flott, who's pretty much just like a slot guy, but I mean, he's a guy. He's a body. He's not anybody worth like mentioning for real. You know what I mean? Like, he's a rotational piece at best, but he might have to be your cornerback too if Phillips doesn't work out. So that's scary. You drafted Tyler Nubin in the 2nd round, and I think Tyler Nubin was a really high-end safety coming out of Minnesota, but again, he's a rookie, dude. You need him to come in and be your shutdown safety. You need him to come in and be Kyle Hamilton. I'm just not sure he's going to come in and do that. You know, this unit they have to grow together. You know what I mean? Like, they're the most young. I don't know what any of these guys are, frankly. You're talking about 4 to 5 guys who were all drafted in the last year or two, and there's no experience. There's no veteran present. And I bring it back around. Why did you let Xavier McKinney walk? If you knew this is what the room was going to look like, and you knew that you had not a single veteran player on this entire unit, what are you thinking?
You know,
why
what
would
else
you
is,
not keep? Yeah, go ahead.
You know what else is interesting to me too when it comes to the Xavier McKinney conversation?
Sure. What's that?
Xavier McKinney will be only 26 years old next month.
Bro.
I mean, as a safety, Xavier McKinney is right in his prime for a few more years. I mean, I understand 100%. Wanting to get younger, but this isn't.
But not this young.
He was drafted in
young.
2020, one of the few good Dave Gettleman picks. So
yeah, dude.
I don't really. For me, it's like, why would you allow that guy to walk and this be your unit with no other major piece in the secondary?
There's nobody here. There's not even. It's not. I don't even need a piece. Bring in a. Who's the cat from Buffalo that went down to
Jordan
Miami?
Poyer.
Jordan Poyer, right? To bring in a Jordan Poyer, bring in a Micah Hyde, bring in somebody who just can be a veteran guy to teach these kids. They're children. They're kids. Like the median age of your secondary is like gotta be like 21. That's a really, really scary place to be in. It's just scary, man. And again, it's like, you know what? You might be able to get away with having kind of a weak secondary if you pair somebody next to Dexter Lawrence, and then you have this really high-end D-line, right? If you put somebody, Lions went out and got DJ Reader. Why couldn't you guys? You know what I mean? Why didn't you go out and get DJ Reader? Why didn't you even just why did you trade Leonard Williams? I don't really understand that. Like, why did you do that? You know what I mean? Like, did he want a new contract? Like, I don't know. Maybe just give it to him. Like, go get Christian Wilkins. Go get a DJ Reader. Go get somebody to play that interior line who's gonna make this a top 3 unit, right? You get somebody like that next to Dexter Lawrence, and then you got Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, that's a solid looking line. Right now, there's a giant gaping hole in it, and that's not going to be filled by, you know what I mean? That's good. They're not going to get as many pressures now on the quarterback, and the quarterback's going to have more time to throw. And guess who takes advantage of your secondary in that regard? The other team. Like, it's just I don't.
Yeah. No,
I don't get it, man.
a beautiful breakdown of the defense. Honestly, thank you for doing that, because it's a lot of homework to kind of go over all these guys. Look, we're at that point. We gotta close these guys out. I'm gonna start, and first of all, before I do, please guys, like, comment, subscribe, Giants fans. I know that this feels like hating, but I'm on your side, man. This is disappointment of a franchise that I once respected and looked up to. This is a frustration video. This is not a I don't like you. I love the Giants fan base. I love New York City. This is nothing about that. This is a front office ownership gripe. So if you guys feel us, leave a comment. If you don't, if you're optimistic about the Giants right now, leave a comment. But I'll start, man. For me, I genuinely, I think it's a fourth place team in the division this year. I think, with Daniel Jones's health, I think with how young these receivers are, I think with moving on from Saquon, I don't trust this O-line. Defensively, we just touched on it with the secondary. I think you have a good enough front seven to win you a handful of games. But I'm going to go 5-12 in a last place finish, man. I think this is the end of the Daniel Jones run. I'm not sure Dayball is going to get to keep his job, although he deserves to. I don't think you have the GM. I don't think he has a vision for your team. I don't think he has a vision at all. And I'm tremendously concerned about the future of this franchise right now. Very concerned. So that's where I stand on it, man. I think I'm going full D grade. It's a no for me. So close these guys out.
I'm not mad at that. It was hard to commit to one. I think I have a lot of respect for Dexter Lawrence. I mean, you kind of just said it, right? It's like this D line is going to win you a handful of games, and that's the truth. I like adding Burns. Brian Daboll is taking back play calling. He gave it up last year to the OC. He's taking that back this year, so that might win you a couple more games. But I mean, mine's not much optimistic. I mean, I said, I think in my notes verbatim, I think this team will be fourth, maybe third in the division, depending on how Jaden Daniels pans out. So I don't know. I think your ceiling is 8 wins. I think your floor is about 3. So I went with 6.
Yeah.
6-11, fourth place, third place, kind of somewhere in there. I don't think the Commanders are that good, but
no.
I like a lot. I like their quarterback situation a lot more than yours. Just kind of based on projection, but you never know. I mean, we see busts every year in the NFL, so
there's more
optimism.
Get lucky.
There's way more optimism. I mean, they don't have a Dexter Lawrence on their team, so I guess I'll cement it at third, but fourth would not surprise me.
Sure. Yeah, man, it's just such an unfortunate fall from grace for a storied franchise, man. It's weird seeing this team become like the Lions. We watch the Lions our whole lives, and it's like, it's just it's feeling very Detroit over there.
Yes.
But hey, man, thank you for coming. Thank you for doing this with me. I appreciate it, as always. Amazing analysis. Honestly, I think you did a lot of the heavy lifting. Mine was a lot of just ranting.
That's all right.
But
it's cool, man.
But look,
yin and yang, baby.
That's it, man. And look, man, I'm pulling for the big blue. I think that this thing needs to bottom out, unfortunately. So we'll see. Thank you guys so much, man. Appreciate it.
Peace.